we find for starting our entrance tests examination to our future students was also important to let us understand something on how to do remote examination also to our present students. So this was really helpful, and more or less the decision that we took together spread out all over Europe. So from this point of view, I think this is really what the partnership is meant for, and we took a great benefit for this opportunity. Concerning what is left after we are near to the end of the semester, and what is left, what can we save, what kind of future we can guess. I think that basically what happened with this crisis made a sort of a point of no return, so sort of a discontinuity between what was also the university world before and after this crisis. I thought to a famous song by U2, which title is "Far Away, So Close." No, so probably the situation in which we have to think now, it is far away, so close. So we have to cope with the being away and being close at the same time. And I think that from this point of view, we should think of a sort of blended model, mixing together presence and distance, because at least at Polyme, but I think this is very general situation. We have, from one hand, we have students that cannot reach the Polyme safely. They live abroad now in this moment, or maybe they are in regions of Italy which are secluded, and so they cannot really reach the Polyme. And another part of our students that tells us that they would like to come to our campuses, but still they can't. So we should find a way of giving both kind of students the best teaching opportunities. Okay, and this is something that we have to think about also, starting from September, no, from the next semester. Very recently, this week, the academic senate of the Politecnico di Milano decided to officially go towards this blended model for the next semester that we called phase 3. Now we are in phase 2 in Italy. Phase 3 more or less will start after Easter, after summer. And so for this phase 3, the academic senate decided that we want to go toward the blended model, in which there are very strong challenges. Blended model, it means more or less that every course, or most of the courses, if not every, will have a part given at a distance for everybody, and the part given in presence for all students of the one that they can and they are willing to come to our campus. So since we want to guarantee both of them the best teaching opportunities, we have to find a way to meet these opposite or different requirements. So from a technological point of view, we have to upgrade our classrooms. We have 350 classrooms more or less at the Polyme, and we have to upgrade them in such a way that we can do distance learning. Meanwhile, in the same classroom in which we do present learning, teaching. And the second one, it is to start thinking among our teachers community how to give value to the teaching in presence, no? Because I mean, in the past, every student knew that he had to come to the campus to get his teaching, and so there was no thinking about this. But now, if we start having people that it consider normal to exploit the teaching from their own houses, then if you ask them to come over to the Politecnico, because there is a lesson, an event, some teaching moment, this should be special in some way. Otherwise, they might ask you, why they asked me to come here today? I could have done this also at home. Okay, so this, from this point of view, need a deep rethinking of our way of viewing, knowing that probably this is it. I mean, there is no way back from some point of view. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your answer, Professor Duo. As some of you might have realized, we switched the order of the universities here. So Marco could ask his question to Professor Duo, and I can ask my question to Professor Springman, because these are our respective universities. So my last one goes to Professor Springman. Since 2015, she has been the rector of ETH Zurich, and she has also been a really role model to many women in engineering and science. And especially during this difficult time, I witnessed that she did these Q&A sessions on Instagram with her students and let them ask so many questions, which I think is a really, really nice thing. Before your time as a rector, you committed yourself to sports, winning many European medals in triathlon. And this is basically the direction my question is going. The Corona crisis is often compared to a marathon. A marathon needs preparation, endurance, perseverance, and much more. As a former top athlete and current rector, how do you think students can cope best with this marathon?
Thank you, Viviana. Well, of course, as a sort of getting on to be a grey-haired rector, I'm going to change the question a little bit and say that I think that a marathon is much too short and it's too mono-focused. So I think we should have a long-distance triathlon, and I'm not even going to suggest, I think it should be from the southern tip of Italy right up to the north of Sweden, actually going through all of our countries. But the triathlon, as some of you will know, is about swimming. And swimming is often, I'm afraid, about jumping into cold water. And that's a pretty horrible shock, actually. And that's a little bit like what happened to us. We were sort of getting ready and thinking, oh, my dear, oh, dear, Milano has already had to do this. What do we have to do? What can we learn from them? How do we prepare? So that's the, oh, my goodness bit before you jump into the cold water. And then you give your colleagues 83 hours over a weekend that at 8 o'clock on a Monday morning we're going online. And blooming heck, they did it. So we all sort of jumped into the water. But I have to say that actually it's a bit unfair to say that I was the athlete there. I think I was the race director, because I'm conducting everything. And all of the professors and the lecturers are the poor people who are running this race. And they're also running this race with their students, who also are slightly removed again. And again, they're having to jump into the cold water and to find their rhythm. But I think, you know, you can find your rhythm as you're swimming along, and you just begin to think that, you know, having gone online and just maybe about getting used to it, and then it gets a bit cold, and you feel a bit depressed about life, and you have to kind of battle to keep on going, and there'll be periods where you're feeling it's tough. And then all of a sudden the rules change, and you have the transition. And the transition is probably about coming up to the examinations. So that's a different set of things you have to deal with. Very tough for students to be sitting there in front of their screen and having a camera on them and trying to manage everything and be able to answer the questions, feeling very stressed. And we had that at moment running now at the moment, our semester end exams. I haven't yet heard any bad stories, and it's been going for 1 week, so who knows. And then we have this long bike ride, and it gets hot and it gets windy, and often you'll have a headwind and all of those other horrible things. And then at the end of the semester, at the end of the holidays, there'll be the session exams, and they're going to be, we want to hold those in person as much as we can. So distant exams at the end of semester, in person, socially distanced. How are we going to do that? With online exams, with in-person exams, and with oral exams, again, respecting some of the students who are also at risk, and some of our colleagues who are at risk. So we're working on that at the moment. And then just when you think you've got to the end of your long bike ride, suddenly you have this mega marathon at the end of it. And that's, what do we do next semester? And each of our universities have different situations in terms of flattening the curve. So at Switzerland, we're down to a handful of new cases every day, but it's not necessarily the case. And each government has taken slightly different decisions. So I think our running bit in the autumn semester is going to be quite a challenge, actually. How are we going to do that? And I'm happy to advance some thinking on that. But I think when you're thinking about the whole thing, what I've always done when I tell you a story now, because probably we've been jolly serious. I went to Hawaii for the first time in 1984, flew over the big island, saw this black lava and thought, oh my goodness, I've got to do this race on the moon. The doors of the plane opened, huge heat wave came out, and I thought, oh my goodness, not only do I have to do this on the moon, 100 and 200 and something kilometers, but it's going to be extremely hot. And I managed to do it by breaking everything down into smaller parts that I could see. So if I was 10 out of 10 scared of going from the beginning to the end and knew it was going to be painful, how scared was I to do the first 400 meters in the swim and so on? And I think that's would be my advice to our students. Work a week at a time, set goals for a week at a time, and then at the end of the week, celebrate and enjoy what you've done. So very quickly, just what's happening in ETH. We will be opening up our campus marginally on the 8th of June. There will be about 1,000 working places for students, and we have 18,000 of you. So I'm afraid there will have to be a booking system. Next semester is going to be tough. Under the current rules we have at the moment, we'll probably have to focus on making sure that each student has something that they can do in person, but we probably have to focus on our first year because we don't select like Milano beforehand, we select at the end of the first year exams. And I think we'll be using the idea of small groups working in bubbles. We are upgrading classrooms, we're bolstering up the exercise classes, thinking about the labs, how we can do those socially distanced, the excursions in person, and trying to promote the critical thinking, that sort of teamwork, that community building that Rob Mudde was talking about. It's all a big challenge, and we're working very hard to try and make it possible. But of course, and again, I have very frequent meetings with our student bodies, our assistants, doctoral students, trying to listen to the issues. And I'm fully aware, one of the things that I've just learned this week was that the social networks are showing that the young women students are suffering more than our young male students. And so I will be meeting our women's groups, I'm not sure whether it's next week or as soon as I can, to ask them, what can we do to support you to help break down this fear and this mental barrier, this huge barrier, to help you be able to cope a little bit better. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your answer, Professor Springman. Thank you. As I can see, there are already loads of questions on the Q&A section. I would like to start asking some of you about the relationship between students and teachers. In this time, we have already faced that the relationship and the way for them to interact, it's of course changed. I want to put an accent, so I want to highlight, for example, the reviews situations where students can stay together with the teacher online, reviewing some theoretical problems, some theoretical knowledge, or other, or for example, the chats. The chats were very used in these few months. So that's where I'm going into the question. One thing which was very useful during Zoom lessons was the possibility to type in and ask questions during the class. So this guy says, therefore, I would propose a chat function in the education, like an education app for the respective university, where students can ask questions directly to the teachers. What do you think about something like that? This could be useful, or what do you want to keep of this experience on the side of relationship between students and teacher, specifically on this topic. So what do you think about the chats? I will start asking from the last one. So Sarah Springman, what do you think?
Thank you very much. I think this is a great idea. We have something called the Edu app. And I think absolutely this chat function needs to be built in, but probably it means that the professor needs to come with an assistant to help moderate, just like you and Bibiana are doing a fantastic job today so far. And I think to help, and there needs to probably be a sort of a tandem in terms of, and the professors need to leave a little bit of time for questions. And if they don't come, then they can carry on teaching. So I think it's a very good idea. I think students seem to be concerned about putting their hands up and saying and answering the questions. And I know when I used to teach a lot more, I taught last in November, December, and you ask a question and what happens is all the heads go down like this and you're looking at the top of people's heads. And I try very hard to get reaction in my lecture. It is hard work at times, easier in the masters, but much harder in the bachelor. So I think that if you had that built in, it would lower the barrier. And the only way I could get through the barrier was when I had those Lindor Kugel, those Lindor chocolates, and I would set up a quiz, and anybody who answered a question would get a chocolate. I had to throw them at them, which I wasn't very accurate. So I sprayed chocolate around the lecture hall, and that made it more fun and reduced the barrier between me and them. And I think that's the point. If you can do it using using chats and using an app, that's something that I would really like to hang on to. And we will do our best to reprogram that into the Edu app. Thank you.
Does someone else want to answer to this question? So Professor Duo and then Anne Carlson-Bengtsson.
Yes, thank you for the question, because this is really one relevant point, and I totally agree with Sarah about the fact that we have to consider this and find the solutions. In this next semester, as I was saying, since we are planning to do this sort of blended learning, considering that during the lessons in presence, we will have also people listening to the lesson by these kind of platforms, then it should be easy for us to set up things in such a way that students who are inside the classroom, the physical classroom, they can use even their phone to make questions the same footing as the one that are outside the university. So this will be similar to what we had for this semester. I must say that at Politecnico, each teacher had to cope with the questions list just by himself or herself, because but still was working well. And it's true that I received, and all of us received, more questions than the one that we usually receive during the lesson. And it is also true, as was set up in the question, that in some cases there can be a peer-to-peer helping, because in some cases it is another student that tries to answer, and this sort of starts a debate, and then the teacher, instead of answering, can organize this debate in which more or less students and teachers are on the same level, and instead of just questioning and answering, they are talking together about the topic, no? which is very good. So this, I think, is something that we need to keep it along, despite also when the crisis will be over. Thank you.
Thanks. Professor Anne Carlson-Bengtsson.
Thank you. I just wanted to add one thing so we do a lot of teaching in Zoom and use the chat function a lot. And I also participate in a lot of meetings in Zoom. And what my own experience is that what is lost in these meetings is that only one person can talk at a time, meaning that you lose a little bit of this verbal humming and things like that, which means that it's a much more sterile communication. And I think that that also affects students and the ability and the want to take part, because it becomes a little bit too much formal to pose a question. So in that context, I think also the chat function is very good. And from my experience from our board meetings at the university, there is also the possibility of running a few different discussions at the same time, which might be both frustrating but also very contributing. So that was just a small comment.
Thank you so much, everyone, for answering. I have a next question for you, and this one goes into the strengths of IDEALiStiC universities, and so therefore I think it's a really interesting one. So each university in the IDEALiStiC has more or less evident strength in some subject compares to others. So for example, Polimi and Delft in design and architecture, or RWTH in mechanical engineering, also thanks to the integration with the strong national industrial sector. I would like to ask in general, what are the opportunities that distance learning could give about curricular integration among IDEALiStiC universities? Theoretically, thanks to this new alternative approach to learning, we could follow courses from each of the member universities from IDEALiStiC, creating an even more connected network and giving the possibility to university to further specialize, optimizing investments. I'd like to know which possibilities and drawbacks do you see in such an approach? Any thoughts on that? Yes, Professor Modir?
I think there are nice opportunities that I would like to see in loosely called the elective space, so that students have more flexibility of making part of their own program. At the same time, one for that following a number of courses is not the same as getting an education. These programs are thought through, and the local flavor is also very important that teachers can bring. So I see the pros and the cons. The pros in that it opens for students who are interested in a specific topic that is not taught by their university, and they can do it at a high quality. That's great with these universities in IDEALiStiC. And that should be made easy, and that can be made easy via the online and by accepting one another's courses and exams. But at the same time, I would like to see that we maintain all kind of core in our program to make sure that the identity of each university education is what it is, because I think that's also a crucial element. As to further specialization and optimization, I'm not so sure whether that's a good idea. I'm not so sure. I think there needs to be some generics in a university as such. Because what I see as part of what we do with young people, get them exposed to all kinds of things on campus. Students with different backgrounds, different programs, and be confronted with that. So the high form of specialization, I think a university in its name is universal, and we should maintain that. Don't specialize too far. That would be my first reaction.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on that? Yes, Professor Duo.
A quick one. At the Polytechnico now we are thinking that starting with this blended way of teaching, part of each course, as I said, in presence and part at distance. For the second one, for the part at distance, it should be much easier also to invite colleagues from IDEALiStiC or other kind of university to give short lecture or special notes in such a way that, I mean, something which would be much more different to do in presence. And so for the distance part, it is much more flexible also for intervention of colleagues or people, the industry side, and so to have more mixing with other university and with the people of industry or so. And so this is really interesting, because then it also for 1 hour or 2 hours, this would be easy to ask somebody to, some colleague to join and to give a special lecture. So, and this, from this point of view, should also help our university here, the IDEALiStiC partners, to mix also, to exchange programs and having something more in common than what we have at present.
Professor Krieg from Aachen.
I think it's a good idea in the future. There will be possibilities to get credits for the courses taken at one of the other IDEALiStiC universities. This shouldn't be a problem. Of course, you cannot have, for instance, more than half of the courses taken at another university and get a degree from your home university. This doesn't work. On the other hand, taking courses is one point. But if you go to a different country, to live in this country, to see the organization of another university is also an experience which is very helpful to the students. And I think the possibilities of online courses are not a substitute for going abroad and living some time abroad.
Yes, I agree. I mean, we should not try to, to confuse between what we are talking about and the fact that visiting another university is something that cannot be substituted with anything else anyway, also from the personal point of view of the student, not only for the academic point of view.
Thank you. I want to highlight another question about freshman students. One of us says, I am most concerned about the new students starting next semester. The first weeks are vital for the students for the community building. It is in this time when you find your friends and colleagues with which you will do the whole journey, your group works, sports, and more. So related to this topic, so freshman students, what exactly are your thoughts? Because this will definitely be a central, like a key point for next year. Professor Springman.
Yes, this is absolutely our thinking. And for me, the freshman students and the fresh women students have absolutely the priority for us, because we all know that school, certainly in our country, tends to be quite female. The women students do better than the male students on average. And suddenly we transfer into a technical university that is about 33% female students, and vast majority of the professors, 85% of the professors, are male. So it's a different environment. And this is a big challenge from, again, jumping over hurdles and being tested every 3 weeks to being tested at the end of the semester or the end of the year. And as I said to you, the first year for us is the selection. So you have to be quite resilient. So I think one of the things that we're learning a lot about is work being done by one of our colleagues on social networks, and the importance of the first weekend and getting together and meeting people and forming groups and forming friendships. So I think if we have to deal with the impact of COVID-19, we have to change a little bit how we do that and try to help people build groups of about 20 people, because there will be some diversity, so that even if they're and they're going to be studying more or less in the same department, so that you can have some networks that continue to grow. They will change with time. They may change through a year as we can move ourselves from a little bit of blended teaching and all the rest of it through back to a little bit like what we did before, but hopefully better. And I think my message to everybody would be pay attention about the first weeks that are back there, and then build ways in which you can support these young students with peers from maybe other years who can help and share advice, so that those students can find their way and settle in at the new place. And I think that's, in a nutshell, what I think we're going to try and do at ETH.
Thanks. I see the Uncle Carson wants to say.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, I would. Thank you. I would just like to build on what Dr. Springman said right now, because we are working exactly on the same way and starting to plan the welcoming weeks for the freshman students, as we usually do in having them in groups and having older student coaches to these teams, but to make it in smaller teams and adapt the activities that they're going to do together so that they are study focused, social focus on them, but not perhaps in really the same way as usual. And I think that we have a very extremely good collaboration with the student union, and I think that some of you are sitting out there listening right now, so thank you so much for contributing and helping for us to work on this together. We work together on trying to find the best way for the freshmen to arrive, because that's what we also think is important, is that they actually come to the university, not that they stay at home and follow on a distance, but that they actually come here, get a student housing and find new friends, and that we can help them to do that. So just a comment.
Thank you. Oh, does Professor Mudder want to say something?
Yeah, well, I think this is a very vital point. Perhaps the most difficult one is starting up again. Overnight, bringing the university from on campus to online was difficult, but this is much more difficult. And I vividly recall way back in '77, when I was a freshman student, standing on the square of my university at that time, surrounded by 2,000 people I didn't know. I didn't know the city. I couldn't find the first lecture hall where I was supposed to take my first lecture. And that's what all new students face. So what we are trying to do is reshape our start of the new year for our freshman students. We're talking to the mayor whether we can bring them in small groups to campus so that they can see in live, can meet one another, form for the first weeks the groups. We normally didn't do that in the start, that we formed groups per program. We mix them completely, but we're now going to do it per program so that they carry into the first week with a group of at least names that they know and that they can work partly online with. We're currently making a 3D or 360 degree, whatever you want to call it, movie of the campus and of the city. So the first 3 days of our introduction will be online completely. And then 7 days, we try to get them in small shifts through the city and the campus to make sure there's this start and that they feel welcomed, because that's a very important part, getting them out of the high school groove into university groove. And I really worry about normally we have that they see how it works and that they feel that the old way that many of our students at high school worked, book under your pillow and the next day you're smart, doesn't work at a university. The pace and the pace is much higher and the level is much higher. So we need to help them really through the first weeks, as Sarah said, get them started and be a little bit relaxed in evaluating them, give them time to adapt to this new environment.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. I want to go to one fact that was mentioned before, I think by Professor Springman, about the female students performing less good than the male students in this situation. And I want to ask why you think this is happening and if this is also happening at the other universities.
Can I just clarify that, Bibiana? I don't say they're performing less well because we haven't yet had the results of the exams, but I think it's more a coping issue. And I'd be really interested whether other people have got any feedback or any data about that.
I guess what we see at our in our community, the female students are more mentioning the problems that they have. Boys at the age of 18, 19, 20 kind of wave them off, keep them for themselves. So I think it's just the outside. But I'm pretty sure that they face the same. Sooner or later, the walls of your small room start flying into your face. That's unavoidable if you can't go. I guess, as you can tell by the length of my hair and the amount that I'm no longer 18, 19, 20. But at that time, I was full of energy and I had to go out. So I spent my times, apart from going to the lecture halls, in the sports and so on. And it doesn't matter what you do, but if you're young, you need to be able to maneuver around and to go and do things. And that was virtually impossible. So I can't imagine that boys are not equally hit by this. It's probably that they're less outspoken in how they comment on it.
Thanks. There is a specific question that would, I think, it's coming from a student representative from Polymy. So I would ask to Professor Duo because it's interesting for everybody. Professor Duo, 2 years ago, you have been interviewed by a student representative list of Polymy for their 6-monthly magazine. And talking about innovative teaching, you said, a need is put into action when there is a crisis. Rethinking and redesigning our way of teaching is not a response to a crisis, but to something that could become a crisis tomorrow if we do nothing today. Your prophetic words today sound like a warning to all of us. How do you see the teaching of the future, and how can we be prepared for a new crisis? This is not just for you, but for everybody. How can we be prepared for a new crisis?
In general, I would say that it's very difficult to be prepared for a new crisis, and it's almost funny that in the fall we did a big risk assessment for our university. Nobody thought of something like this. We thought about crashing planes, buildings burning down, governments collapsing so that the money was gone, and so on. But nobody anticipated this one, and it's much bigger than all the others that we thought. The biggest lesson that I have from this is, if something like this happens, everything we do should be based on mutual trust. If that's out of the window, forget it. We should be flexible. We should be open and transparent to one another. I have weekly kind of Q&A meetings with students. Anybody can join who wants, and it's usually a relatively small group. And at the start, I mentioned this is a rather strange type of Q&A. You got the Qs, but I don't have the As. And that's exactly what you have at a crisis. In the beginning, you can manage that, and everything is in a sense okay, because everyone understands it's a big crisis. But after 2 weeks, people start asking, well, what's the end of the tunnel? Can you tell us? And then it requires flexibility and trust in one another, trusting that the management is honest when they say we don't know. And the management should trust the students and teachers that will do their utmost best as well. Now, I guess you all heard that that at some point people started saying, well, this is a nice vacation for the students. And it's far from that. Even if you have nothing to do, it doesn't look like a vacation at all. So understanding one's position in a crisis is also crucial, that you maintain a community. Don't let it fall apart, because you're not going to resolve it if you do not hold to one another and try and make the best of it. That's my biggest lesson.
Thanks. Professor Duo?
Thank you. I didn't remember. I forgot to give this kind of an answer. I think that, I mean, looking back at what happened at the Politecnico in the years 17 through 19, the first 3 years of our new rectorate, we started a very strong innovative, program on innovative teaching. And I think where we started to thinking and to doing distance learning only very partly. And so from this point of view, this experience, which was small up to that time, was anyway very useful to be ready very quickly to be able to do distance learning because of the crisis. And it is true in that occasion we thought of the idea of changing something when everything was more or less okay. So probably if we want, I don't know, to do a claim on this, it might be that we have to change something while it works, not waiting too much. Otherwise, it is more difficult to do it when it doesn't work. And also, probably we should probably think that even when the crisis will be over, hopefully soon, probably the idea of business as usual probably it is not a good idea, because otherwise we will not be able to face new kind of crisis later on. Thank you.
Thanks. Professor Sarah Springman?
I think my biggest learning from all of this is about bringing people together, setting very clear values-based decision-making at the very beginning. What is it that we absolutely have to do? And then pulling in all of the ideas, and then somebody has to take the decisions after all of that and make sure that everything is implemented. And then again, as I said before, it's a sort of triathlon. Once you think you've got into your rhythm, the rules change again, and you have to go through this transition, and you need to then be ready, you need to be agile, and you then need to be resilient, and you need to have a backup plan in case things aren't working out. And I think communication is really important. So I think IDEALiStiC doing this town hall event today is fabulous, because it allows you to reach out to your community. We had, I think, multiple town hall events with about 3,000 people as well. And I think something like 5,000 people download my Instagram chats, if I remember to save them properly. So those sort of things are all part of this spectrum of how one can communicate, how one can listen, and how one can respond. And I think being visible and standing up there and reminding everybody about the principles behind your decision-making is really important, because then that allows people to say, yes, actually, I can trust this person, and they're trusting me also to go on and do my job. So I think these human values are really, really important. And I hope that we will come out even stronger in that sense. And the students will trust us maybe a little bit more than they might have done in the past, and vice versa.
Yes, Anna Carlson-Langsson.
Thank you. I think that one thing that we have been working a lot with is the involving of teachers in the understanding of what we have to do in order to keep the ship on the right side, so to say, and also to anchor all our decisions in all different parts of the faculty and of the student body, so that we know that everybody understands why we are taking the decisions we are taking and where we have to go. And in that, I can't stress it enough, the communication, talking and explaining and taking in what different parts of the organization is wanting to contribute with, I think is so important. So anchoring, involvement, and communication is really my 3 words.
I like the word communication. I will go for next question. As you might know, we had a conference day yesterday already with participants from student councils from these 5 universities, and one of our major topics was mental health. And this is a very difficult topic, especially in this situation. And there is a question, what are some measures that the universities take to help students that face difficulties or disadvantages due to the shift to online classes? On the one hand, this could be like, let's say, difficulties in terms of good technical equipment or good internet or a quiet place to study, but also people that struggle with these online classes, for example, people that have ADHD? I would give that question first to Alois Krieg, I think.
Okay, first of all, people who do not have, for instance, a laptop. We talk to our student body, and if a student has a problem, he can ask for help in the situation. That means we will rent laptops or tablets to the students, but this refers only to a very, very small number of students. So it's not a real problem. The other point is what we did for students who have problems, mental problems or whatsoever. There's a law which says, in this case, you can ask the office to get another kind of exam. And this also happens from time to time, but it's also not very often. We have problems, for instance, if you need learning space. There's more demand on learning spaces over the last years, but at the moment we are not allowed to offer learning spaces because of the legal situation in Germany. At this point, we cannot really help. What the government did is all the students, at least in our state, got an additional semester. That means if they go into exams and they fail, this failure does not count. So it is as if you wouldn't have taken this exam. And you get more support. About 20 or 25% of the students get support from the state. And you get an additional semester of support. And hopefully this will help the students to cover the situation. Thanks.
Someone else wants to answer? Yeah, Professor Duo.
In our university, we have a multi-chance office which takes care of different kind of difficulties, certified difficulties of our students. And I must say that it's true in this semester, the number of people entering this multi-chance program increased. So probably in consideration of what we are telling here. And clearly this is a problem. I mean, we have to try to have enough people working on this, because if number of students increases, then we have to take care about them, which is more difficult. And also for the examinations, we have already run, settled up a situation in which this office, this multi-chance service is in contact with every of the students and with their teachers also. So teachers know from time to time when these students will have the examination, and set up together special rules, maybe longer time or shorter number of exercises in such a way to level, these difficulties that they have. But it is true that this an increase was recorded in these few weeks. So something that we have to consider and take care of.
Yes, you may, Professor Springman.
Okay, great. I'm just checking. Yeah, we have something that deals with the Nachteilsausgleich. So again, for the ADHD students, especially to make sure that they're given a fair chance to be able to perform in the exams. Of course, we do that based on what we know in a normal exam situation. It is much harder to judge each student's situation at home, and some might be sharing a room with their younger sibling. Some might be in what we call a Wohngemeinschaft with another 4 other students who've got exams. It's quite difficult to judge that, but each student, we hope, can find a room, a quiet room, to be able to do their exams. And in that sense, that's what they have actually at ETH. But you add on the stress of having to download the exam and scan it and put it back up. So again, we know it's an issue. I think we decided very early on, right at the very beginning, at the end of February, that we were not going to count any failures because we have 2 goes to pass, and that for the basis year, the first year, you have 2 years to pass your exams, and if you end up by failing, that automatically means you get an extra semester. And for those other students who run out of time later on, we're going to be very pragmatic about it. So hopefully that doesn't add on to the additional stress. And apart from that, we're setting up additional money for scholarship, for social scholarships. We've raised the level of the loan from 2,000 to 5,000, instead of it having to be paid back in 12 months over 18 months. We've tried to make sure that our study advice, on the mental health, we have sort of multiple different levels. The students run something called a Nightline, then we help them migrate that from ETH based onto how they're running it now, which is very important, low level. At a next level up, study advice, how do you manage learning in such an environment, how you manage doing the exams, how do you organize your learning? Interestingly, normally face-to-face, we have many, many more interactions, and students have been more holding back on doing that on Skype or on Zoom, which is concerning. So we continue to talk about the fact there is availability. And then at the really more difficult level, when you need psychiatric or sort of psychological advice, we have a service we share with the University of Zurich, and we've upgraded the capacity of that. But that is also at the moment not running full online. So again, there's more capacity. And I think you can understand why students might be a little bit more nervous about going online and talking to somebody when they much prefer to go in person. So I think this is also a little bit of an issue. And I think that what we need to do is to work at a lower level, trying to train students within each year, within each course, to be aware of what are the signs of people who need some help, and then so that they're able to reach out and support their fellow students in a very low level way, so that you can, in a sense, grab the issue before it gets so bad that you need to go and see the psychological advisory service. But something that is going through my head at the moment, I've been talking about it with some of my staff, I've talked about it with the VCTH, but we haven't done anything yet. And so if anybody else has got any advice on that, so that you can sort of get through into the pause of each year of each study area, I think that might be helpful.
Yes, Professor Carlson-Bengtsson.
Thank you. Yes, I'm not muted. I would like to say a few things. We have had to kind of learn as we go along. You can't foresee all the problems that you're going to encounter, but we have to take care of the problems that arise. And a few of those things, we've had exams over Zoom, so with the students being monitored, and we've had students with special needs that have longer time for their exams that feel discriminated when they are the only ones staying in the Zoom room when everybody else leaves. I mean, things like that you could, of course, foresee, but it's not really until it happens that we have to rethink and redo and adapt. And that happens all the time, that we have to rethink and redo and adapt. And I think that we learn a lot about our students and about our education by encountering these things. For example, and this is just a little thing, but still, we have a student housing that is very close to a very large construction site. So home exams is not really the best situation. So we need to organize that. So those are the little things. The students that have signaled the most, because there was a question about female students, but the students that I have gotten the feedback have signaled the most of not being very happy is the international students. They have a very, very small social circle, and when we close down, so we have an open campus. We've had an open campus all the time. The students have been able to be here, but not study. But we closed down the libraries, and then there was a very, very strong reaction to that if I can't sit in the library, I don't know where to go. And so I think that we have to have had to adapt it by time. I think that was yeah, those one thing. The Swedish government is increasing is not going to limit student loans based on the amount of credits you have taken. So they will give you the possibility of taking new student loans even if you didn't pass the exams as you should. So that is one of the reliefs that we have for the students. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So as we are running out of time, I'm going to ask our last question, but I'm very happy that you also had the time to answer to some questions that were asked but were not officially asked to you. So thanks a lot also for the economic side and other interesting inputs that came. I strongly believe, said our friend, that university. Oh, sorry. I strongly believe that we have a short problem. It was dismissed. Sorry about that. Okay, the question was about the cultural events. We have a serious problem right now, but because everything changed, we had the opportunity to meet, of course, as we said all through this webinar. And I can remember exactly the topic of the question, but are you thinking about how to keep going the event size, so the cultural related side in your single university? Because of course the webinars and online stuff is helping in this way, but in the next semesters, how are you keeping this in mind? Because the question was highlighting how the cultural side was key for our students.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that. It really depends on how we are allowed to progress. In worst case scenario that the campus will be closed, we should be creative, invoke students' creativity, because there is a lot of young people who can come up with ideas, and try to maintain that a university, as I mentioned, is more than just pouring knowledge into young people's head. How to do that, I don't know. In case we are allowed to partially open, and it looks like in our country that groups up to 30 will be allowed for September, and then we should organize it small scale, but still get it going and make sure that that type of interaction, the cultural part of being a university, is available for everybody. And again, I don't know how to do that, but I'm counting on our students who will come up with ideas and will start organizing things themselves. And all we need to do is make sure that it falls under the safe and healthy regulations of the government. And then we should be as creative as possible and make sure that this happens, because it's a crucial part of being a university. It's what makes a university.
Thanks. Professor Krieg.
I think in Germany, most universities expect that the next semester will also be an online semester. Maybe it will be allowed to have small groups within the university. And so we are preparing for this, but nobody can say what really will happen. If there's a second wave of infection, as some scientists say, this will change the situation a lot. And we hope that we will have students on campus. And now we have to think what to do with the students, the first year students who do not have any kind of experience. So this semester was a lot easier, since nearly all the students at the university had the experience what the university is. And this will change for the newly enrolled student, and we are facing a lot of serious new problems, but I think all of us are doing their best to cope with this situation.
Thanks, Professor Duo.
Okay, I am. It's something funny because I mean we live in one of the worst area in Europe now, but still we want to be optimistic. And as I said, we want to think about first semester next year, September this year. We will start also having students inside our campus. So from this point of view, obviously having a large group of uncontrolled people, it will not be possible, surely, for this year. So in case of, let's say, in-presence live meetings, we should really be very careful in controlling the number and the density of people, but still we would like to do at least part of this kind of events. On the other hand, I must say that in this period, probably switching from presence to distance events, not only the teaching, but also the events, allowed a big increase of events that took place. So from some point of view, the cultural life of the university beyond what is strictly education or strictly teaching became stronger than it was before. Then probably the matter is how can we keep it as strong as it was in these last few weeks, even when we will have to do it in presence, because then there are physical limitations which might occur. We have created this series of events, you know, Marco, that are called 2020. You know, the word events in Italy is very similar to the word 20. So 20 is the way of in Italy to say 20. So 20 eventi, it means 20 events 2020. So there was this sort of joke, and we did this for people, very young people, 10 years old, up to 90 or so, not only for us and not only for our students. So this is one of the, let's say, probably good effect that it became very easy to organize events, and there were very many of them. Then the fact of being physically in one place with your friends, with people that you know, your community, it is different, and as we said, cannot be substituted.
Thank you very much for all your answers. So our time is up, and I see that there are still so many more questions. Yes, Marco, you want to interrupt me, I see.
No, I think that Professor Springer wanted to add something.
Okay, then go for it.
Am I allowed to? Okay, very quickly. So I think that we should be doing student-inspired socially distanced opportunities. I think we should be going into open air activities, problem-based learning. I have a vision looking out of my office. I have this massive flat space in front. So I think we should be doing socially distanced aerobic Zumba on the terrace. Inside our building, we have this massive atrium, and sometimes our polyband comes and plays. Well, maybe we need to place the polyband on different floors all the way around the building and see if every now and then we have everybody, you know, playing jazz and getting everything moving. I think we also have to think about our ceremonies. I feel really sorry for our graduates who expected to get their certificates in person. How do we do something about that so they feel special, and their parents as well? And we host the largest ball, the poly ball, in Europe in November. And we have about, I don't know, 6,000 to 8,000 people coming to that. I'm not sure that will be happening this year. And I know they're already thinking about how they can stream into homes. So everybody has to get dressed up and party on at home. So again, events. As Harold Macmillan said, former Prime Minister of Great Britain, when explaining something that went wrong: events, dear boy, events. And that's something we have to focus on in the future, particularly around the IDEA League. And if I may, just before our student leaders stop us all, I'd like to say, on behalf of the IDEA League, a big thank you to Marco and to Bibiana and all of your colleagues as well, Andreas, for the lovely quiz. You are doing a great job. Imagine what this is going to look like on your CV, to say I was a student leader in the time of Corona. So well done, and thank you very much for keeping us amused on a wet here in Zurich Saturday afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for that last words. I think it's a good time to say goodbye, and to also thank you again for doing that. Before that, there are still some open questions, and I try to answer the people that we will put together a Q&A section on our webpage with these questions, where we will summarize your answers that you gave now during the panel, but also we'll send you the remaining questions via email and ask you kindly to shortly comment on those as well, such that we can make this Q&A section. Sorry for the people who did not get their answers posted here.
As Professor Springman already said, the triathlon has got also the water, and we all started this situation starting from the cold water of this emergency situation. But the good thing that I want to highlight from today is that we, through collaboration, through relationship, through universities, through the IDEA League and other opportunities, we managed together to at least pass into this emergency situation with a question, but without an answer, as someone said. But we, at the end, managed to find an answer. We have listed loads of problems, the interaction between students and teachers, the mental health problems. We listed lots of problems, but the good thing that I want to say is that we see in you that the higher education is much more than distance. This is something that you said. Higher education is much more than distance. So we actually want to learn from this. And also another question very important was how to give value to teaching in presence. How to give value to teaching in presence. Deep thinking, this would be something that we actually have to think on a lot. So yes, we learned, I guess I can say that, we learned a lot. We want to keep and give value to the present teaching, building a community, because as someone said, human level, keep this to a human level, keep our education to a human level. So thank you very much for being here today to help us, to work together, to think together with us to ideas for the future teaching and education.
I also want to say a big thank you to Andreas for doing the quiz. He has been really great support in planning this quiz. So I could basically just write him an email, do this, and he did it. So that's amazing. Thank you very much. I also want to thank Leslie in person. Really, I think it's really, really great what you did yesterday and also today. I'm so happy to have you here, and you're doing a great work with IDEA League. And I can see this is going to be even more amazing than it already is. Then, of course, I want to thank the board of IDEALiStiC, so the fellow people that are probably still in the audience and waiting for me to start our sum up session afterwards. I want to thank them for really helping us promote everything in our universities, and of course the universities themselves for really supporting us during this time. So we really got a lot of support from the universities in promoting this event among students, and I think that's just great. And of course, last but definitely not least, I want to thank you panel guests for being here with us this afternoon, for even staying longer than it had supposed to be. And it's really great having you here, and I hope we can do something like that in some time of the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Tot. You have to unmute yourself.
Aufzeichnung abbrechen.
Please
Aufzeichnen.
stop the.
Yes, 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 yes.
Is still recording?
Give me a second.